What if I told you that no one has the power to disturb your peace unless you hand it to them? Think about it. Every insult, every betrayal, every careless word, on its own it's nothing more than sound waves in the air, passing gestures, empty acts. And yet, how often do we clutch them, bleed from them, replay them in the silence of the night as if they hold the key to who we are? Why do we give strangers, critics, even loved ones, the sacred permission to define our worth? Why do we allow their fleeting opinions to echo louder than the voice of our own soul? This isn't about becoming cold or shutting off emotion. It's about reclaiming the ground of your mind and spirit. It's about walking into a storm and realizing the storm cannot touch you. The question is not, how do I stop people from hurting me? The question is, how do I become someone who cannot be hurt by what does not belong to me? Sit with that, because the answer is not in the world outside you. It's in the silent fortress within. We grow up believing that the only way to avoid being hurt is to control what others do, think, or say about us. It is almost instinctive. If someone disrespects us, we want to silence them. If someone criticizes us, we want to prove them wrong. If someone judges us unfairly, we burn to change their perception. This is the trap most people live in, the belief that peace can only exist when the external world aligns perfectly with our wishes. But life has never worked that way, and it never will. People will always have their opinions, their biases, their insecurities that they project outward like shadows. Trying to stop every criticism or every hostile glance is like trying to hold back the wind with your hands. The truth is not that the world must stop being harsh. The truth is that our hearts must stop being hostage to it. Yet many of us are enslaved not by what others say, but by our reaction to it, by the weight we assign to voices that do not deserve such power. Think of how often the smallest comment lingers in your mind. A stranger's offhand remark, a colleague's sarcastic tone, a family member's subtle dismissal. It can replay in your head for hours, sometimes days, like an echo you cannot silence. Why? Because deep down we still carry the assumption that others are gatekeepers of our value. If someone approves, we feel lifted. If someone disapproves, we feel crushed. This is why people become so easily manipulated by criticism and praise. They have handed over their self-worth to external hands. Machiavelli observed centuries ago that people could be governed more easily by perception than by force, because perception triggers emotion, and emotion bends the will. In the same way, our peace is broken not by direct harm, but by the idea that others' judgments reflect a truth about us. The conflict then is not between you and them, but between your need for validation and your fear of rejection. Consider the mechanics of insult itself. An insult in isolation is meaningless. It is merely sound vibrations, words arranged in a certain pattern. But why does it cut? Because your mind interprets it through the lens of your insecurities. When someone calls you weak, the words only wound if you secretly fear that you might be. When someone dismisses your work, it only unsettles you if you secretly doubt its value. Their words find a crack in the foundation of your identity, and that is where they enter. This is why two people can hear the exact same insult and one shrugs while the other bleeds. The insult is the same, but the interpretation differs. And so we live with the illusion that the insult is the enemy, when in fact the enemy is our unfinished work within ourselves. The places where we have not yet built certainty, the places where we are still begging the world to confirm that we are enough. Emotional immaturity is revealed in how easily one can be provoked. A person who cannot bear criticism is a person whose strings are visible to everyone, waiting to be pulled. When your mood rises or falls depending on others' approval, you become predictable, controllable, and fragile. And people, whether consciously or not, will exploit that fragility. Some do it to dominate, others to entertain themselves, and still others simply because they sense the opening and step into it. This is why the strongest people are not those who dominate others, but those who are unmovable in the face of provocation. Strength is not loud, it is not reactive, it is not fueled by the need to prove oneself right. True strength looks like stillness, like someone who has nothing to prove, and therefore cannot be baited into pointless battles. When others realize that their words cannot penetrate you, they often stop trying. Yet society often confuses indifference with arrogance. and non-reaction with weakness. You've probably been told, directly or indirectly, that to be respected, you must fight back. You must answer every insult. You must win every argument. But this is another misconception. To fight with every critic is to validate their importance in your life. To explain yourself endlessly is to admit you are not sure of your own truth. Silence, on the other hand, terrifies people because it reflects a deeper confidence. When you choose not to engage, you declare, "You are not my judge, and I owe you nothing." And that declaration, even without words, unsettles more than any counterattack ever could. This is why emotional maturity is not about confrontation, but about discernment, knowing which voices deserve your response and which do not. Most do not. But here lies the difficult part, letting go of the need to be understood. Most people are addicted to being seen in a certain light. They want their intentions recognized, their effort acknowledged, their identity validated. When that doesn't happen, they fight, protest, explain, and yet, no matter how much you explain yourself, there will always be those who twist your words, those who prefer their assumptions, those who cannot or will not see you clearly. If your peace depends on being universally understood, you will live a life of permanent agitation. The conflict dissolves only when you accept that misunderstanding is inevitable and that your worth is not diminished by another person's blindness. This is a painful realization, but also a liberating one. People's judgments reveal who they are, not who you are. So the battle is internal, not external. The real question is not how to silence critics, but how to silence the part of yourself that still clings to their words. If someone insults you and you are unaffected, they lose their weapon. If someone misunderstands you and you carry on in peace, they lose their power. You become untouchable, not by building walls of pride or armor of indifference, but by standing in the quiet truth of your own worth. The only chains that bind you are the ones you place on yourself when you decide that others' voices matter more than your own. And once you see this clearly, you begin to notice something profound. The world has not changed, but suddenly, it no longer rules you. You remember the sting of someone's words more vividly than the words themselves. It's not the exact phrase that lingers, it's the way it made you feel. Small, unworthy, unseen. Maybe it was a teacher who dismissed your effort in front of the class, or a friend who made a joke at your expense that cut deeper than they realized, or a partner who, in a moment of anger, said something you could never forget. We carry these wounds into adulthood, and often we don't realize how heavy they are. What's strange is that sometimes the people who hurt us most don't even remember doing it, while we replay it endlessly, as if our identity depends on their careless moment. And so, a single comment can hold us hostage long after it was spoken, because deep down, we have allowed it to merge with the way we see ourselves. It's tempting to believe that the solution is to change people, to surround ourselves only with those who love us, to demand respect from those who disregard us, to hope the world will become gentler. But even those who love you will sometimes wound you. Even those you trust will sometimes fail you. No amount of careful curation can shield you from human imperfection. The truth is that waiting for the world to handle you with tenderness is a dangerous dependence, because it leaves your happiness at the mercy of forces you cannot control. Think of how often you've felt betrayed when a friend was insensitive, or how you've obsessed over a critical remark, trying to decode its meaning. The pain wasn't just in what they said, it was in the belief that you needed their approval to remain whole. There's a particular cruelty in misunderstanding. You know who you are, but someone twists your intentions, accuses you of motives you don't have, or paints you in colors you don't recognize, and yet, for days, you can't stop thinking about it. You rehearse what you would say if you had the chance. You imagine how to defend yourself. You crave the opportunity to be seen correctly. But does it ever really work? Even if you explain yourself, the stubborn will cling to their version of you because it satisfies their narrative. And the harder you try to correct them, the more power you hand them over your state of mind. It feels unfair, almost unbearable, to be misjudged, and yet this experience teaches a profound truth. The world will never fully see you as you are, and if your peace depends on being perfectly understood, you will never find rest. But transformation often begins with exhaustion. At some point you get tired of chasing apologies that never come, of replaying conversations that cannot be undone, of fighting for recognition that remains withheld. Something inside you whispers, what if their silence or their cruelty doesn't actually define me? What if their failure to see my worth says more about them than it does about me? That whisper is the beginning of freedom, because slowly you realize that the power to wound you was never in their words alone. It was in your decision to let their words echo inside you. The moment you stop rehearsing their voice and start listening to your own, the wound begins to close. There is a shift that happens once you stop needing everyone to validate your existence. You notice it when someone criticizes you, and instead of shrinking, you observe calmly. That's their perception. You notice it when gossip spreads about you, and you no longer feel the desperate urge to correct every lie. You notice it when a stranger mocks you, and you feel strangely untouched, as though their words pass through you like smoke. This isn't because you no longer feel, of course, you still hear it, but something inside has solidified. You've stopped borrowing your worth from people's approval, and so their disapproval no longer threatens you. What once would have ruined your week now barely lasts a moment. And yet, reaching this point doesn't mean you become indifferent or cruel. In fact, it makes you more compassionate, because once you stop being enslaved by the opinions of others, you begin to see them more clearly. You realize that those who lash out are often in pain themselves, that those who insult are often revealing their own insecurity, that those who misunderstand you are often projecting their unresolved struggles. Instead of carrying their words like chains, you see them as mirrors reflecting back their inner world. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it frees you from internalizing it. You learn to let their judgment fall where it belongs, on them, not on you. And maybe the greatest realization of all is this: the moment you stop trying to prove yourself to others, you finally have the energy to become yourself. All that time you spent crafting explanations, defending your name, and seeking approval, it can now be spent building, creating, growing. You're no longer busy carrying the weight of misunderstandings, so your hands are free to shape your own life. And here is the paradox. When you stop begging to be seen, people often see you more clearly. When you stop fighting to be respected, people often begin to respect you, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. And even when they don't, you remain untouchable, because the deepest respect you'll ever receive is the one you give yourself. Inner strength doesn't look like the movies tell us it does. It is not the loudest voice in the room or the one who always wins the argument. True strength is often invisible to others. It's the quiet refusal to be shaken by what does not matter. It's the calm that remains when someone tries to provoke you. Imagine sitting in the middle of chaos, insults flying, judgments swirling, accusations being thrown, and yet, inside you, there is stillness. You breathe, you remain. You do not let the storm drag you away from yourself. This isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about truly understanding that their noise cannot touch the core of who you are. Their words fall like rain on stone. They touch the surface, but they cannot enter. It takes years, sometimes decades, to build that kind of resilience. You learn it through wounds, through betrayal, through rejection, through every scar you carry. The scars are important. They remind you that you have been hurt before, and yet you survived. They remind you that pain is not the end, but a teacher. The world tells us to hide our scars, to cover them, to pretend they do not exist. But scars are proof of strength. They are silent testimonies that say, you endured and you are still here. And once you accept them, they no longer ache. They stop being symbols of weakness and become marks of wisdom. It is in that acceptance that strength begins to take root, not in denial of pain, but in transforming it into clarity. There is also power in solitude. Many people fear being alone because silence confronts them with themselves. In solitude, there is no distraction, no validation, no noise to drown out the voice of your own soul. At first, it can feel like exile, as though the world has abandoned you. But if you lean into it, you discover that solitude is not emptiness. It is sanctuary. It is the space where you no longer play roles for others, no longer perform to be accepted, no longer measure yourself by external eyes. In solitude, you learn to sit with your own thoughts, your own fears, your own dreams, until they stop frightening you. And once silence becomes your companion, the opinions of others lose their grip. How can their noise disturb you when you've already befriended silence itself? Strength also shows in the way you respond, or rather, in how you choose not to respond. Anyone can shout back at an insult, defend themselves against criticism, or retaliate against attack, but it takes far more courage to remain unmoved, not out of passivity but out of understanding. You see through the game. You recognize that engagement is exactly what the other person seeks, that your reaction is the reward they crave. When you give nothing, no anger, no justification, no surrender, you break the cycle. You rob them of the power they thought they had over you. That kind of silence is not weakness, it is mastery. It is not about bottling emotion, but about refusing to let others dictate your emotional state. You remain sovereign, untouchable. Think of the image of light. Light does not argue with darkness, it simply shines. When you walk into a room with a candle, you do not need to fight the shadows, they dissolve on their own. This is what inner strength feels like. It is not combative, it is radiant. It does not seek to crush others, it simply refuses to be dimmed by them. And people notice. They may not say it, but they sense it. The one who cannot be provoked holds a strange kind of authority, an aura that says, I know who I am, and nothing you say can take that away. That is the quiet dignity of light. It reveals itself without needing permission. With remains. But make no mistake, this kind of strength is not born in comfort. It is forged in silence, in nights of doubt, in moments when you thought you were breaking. It grows each time you fall and decide to rise again. It deepens each time someone tries to tear you down and you choose not to collapse. And over time, you begin to notice the shift. What once would have shattered you now barely stirs you. What once required days of recovery now passes like a shadow. This doesn't mean you no longer feel pain. It means you have learned that pain cannot define you. The foundation beneath you has become too strong to be shaken by temporary storms. And when you reach that place, something extraordinary happens. You stop living in reaction to others, and you begin living from your center. You no longer chase validation because you already carry it within. You no longer fear rejection because you have accepted yourself. You no longer collapse under judgment because you have built your own verdict. I am enough. And this shift, though silent, changes everything. The way you walk, the way you speak, the way you exist. It all carries a calm certainty that no one can imitate. People sense it in your presence, even if they cannot name it. They stop trying to shake you because there is nothing left to shake. And in that stillness, you discover the truest definition of strength. Not resistance, but freedom. The greatest revolution does not happen in streets or in governments. It happens in the quiet corners of the human heart. We are taught to believe that power means controlling others, silencing enemies, or commanding respect from the world. But look closer, and you will see how fragile that kind of power really is. It depends on constant struggle, constant defense, constant validation. True power, the kind no one can take from you, is the ability to live untouched by the noise of others. It is not about winning debates or proving your worth. It is about standing so firmly in who you are that the voices around you lose their authority. This is the kind of revolution that doesn't make headlines, but it transforms everything. Because when you no longer bend to every insult or collapse under every misunderstanding, you free yourself from the endless cycle of reaction. And you begin to live from a place of stillness. When you understand this, life itself feels lighter. You notice how much energy you used to spend on rehearsing arguments in your head, on chasing approval, on replaying old conversations like broken records. You see how much of your life was wasted on trying to convince people who were never willing to see you clearly. And suddenly, you don't want to waste another second. You realize that your worth cannot be measured by likes, by comments, by applause, or by criticism. Your worth is not a negotiation. It is a fact. And once you embrace it, you begin to reclaim all that energy and invest it where it belongs, in building yourself, in pursuing your vision, in walking your path. No more detours to prove something to people who do not matter. No more begging for recognition from those who refuse to give it. You finally live for yourself. The most liberating truth is this: not everyone will like you, not everyone will respect you, Not everyone will understand you, and that is perfectly fine. Their blindness does not diminish your light. Their misunderstanding does not corrupt your truth. Their dislike does not erase your dignity. The world will always be divided in its opinion of you. Some will admire you, others will resent you. Many will not care at all, but none of those opinions are yours to carry. The only verdict that truly matters is the one you give yourself. And when you stand in front of your own reflection and say with quiet certainty, "I am enough," the noise outside fades into silence. It doesn't disappear, it simply loses its weight. You are no longer chained to it. You begin to walk through life with a kind of peace that is immune to external storms. There is also a quiet beauty in no longer needing to prove yourself. When you stop chasing validation, your presence becomes more authentic. You speak less but say more. You act without calculation, without the desperate need to impress. You move from a place of truth rather than performance. And ironically, it is often in this state of freedom that people begin to respect you more deeply. They sense that you do not crave their approval, and that makes your presence magnetic. But whether they respect you or not is no longer the point. You are not living for their gaze. You are living for the silent revolution within. You are living for the clarity that comes when you no longer carry the burden of every opinion. This kind of existence is not loud or flashy, but it radiates something unshakable. It is the quiet authority of someone who has stopped asking for permission to exist. And so the call is not to change the world outside, but to change the world within. Not to silence your critics, but to silence the voice inside you that still listens to them. Not to chase after fairness, but to release the expectation of it. The real battlefield is not your workplace, your relationships, or your social circles. It is your own mind. Win that battle, and you win everything. Because once you are no longer controlled by the opinions of others, you step into a freedom most people never taste. You become unbothered, not because the world has grown kinder, but because you have grown stronger. And this is the secret most never discover. The power to be untouchable has always been yours. So when the world tries to provoke you, when people misjudge you, when voices rise to tear you down, remember this truth. You do not have to pick up what they throw. You can let it fall. You can remain still. You can continue walking your path with dignity, with silence, with the quiet strength of someone who has already found their worth. This is the revolution that matters. Not the applause of the crowd, not the defeat of the critic, but the unshakable knowledge that you are whole as you are. The call is not to fight louder, but to live deeper, to stop performing for the world and to start listening to the voice within that says, "You are enough." And when you live from that place, you will discover the freedom no insult can touch, no rejection can erase, and no judgment can break.